Welcome back to the Live Desk. Now, the Prime Minister facing calls from within his own party to further cut immigration and migration, legal migration that is, as a group of Tory MPs calling themselves the New Conservatives have offered, if that's the correct phrase, a series of proposals to drastically curb what they say is the destabilising impact of mass migration.
The group of around 25 MPs, which includes Lee Anderson, Tom Hunt and Miriam Cates, are calling on ministers to introduce a 12-point plan, which includes proposals such as closing temporary visa schemes for care workers and a cap of 20,000 on the number of refugees for resettlement. They suggest their plans would reduce net migration by as much as £400,000. We'll get the view of former advisor to David Cameron, Philip Blond. Hi, Philip. What do you make of this 12-point plan, then? I don't think the government's really biting, is it?
Well, look, I think the initiative of these MPs is much needed. We've had, since 2019, a Conservative Party elected with a huge majority and mandate to control things, amongst which was clearly migration. And they haven't. They've followed the same old liberal pathway of importing labour to keep wages down. And it's got to stop at some point, because it does great harm, not just to the fabric of our nation, but also to the countries that lose their best and most able. And so I think the focus on, for instance, improving the offer for care workers in this country is right. I mean, what's the advantage of maintaining low pay and low return for those looking after our eldest and most vulnerable? We need a massive, if you forgive the language, levelling up of that profession. And so I think they're right to say, look, to call time on our economic model. I was thinking over the weekend, what are the achievements of the Conservative government since 2010, and you struggle outside of welfare reform. I really struggle to think of anything that they've done at scale that helps the bottom half of the population, those that voted for Brexit. So I think the initiative is most welcome. I probably differ with them on refugees. I think the government has been noble in offering sanctuary to both the Hong Kong Chinese and to Ukrainians affected by the Russian invasion. And I think we should never lose that aspect of the United Kingdom and our global outlook. But what we do have to recognise is Brexit has failed in reducing migration. We've constrained European migration, but massively opened up to rest of the world migration, which everyone said would happen and has happened. So I think let's await more ideas from this group, because, quite frankly, those who govern the Conservative Party have not transformed or really offered anything at scale to help their voters in 2019.
The line from this group, and it is, just remember, 25 MPs, has spoken of a destabilising effect of mass migration. But there are then those within the party, Tim Loughton, for instance, saying, look, this longer-term principle is right because we have a shortage of workers, as you've said, in the country, particularly in the care industry and hospitality, i.e. we need these people to come into the country to keep those areas going.
Well, what they're essentially arguing for is we need the low-wage, low-skill economy to continue, so that everything will be the same. But unfortunately, it can't continue because the penalty for those working in those fields is too high, and that impacts upon the care of the most vulnerable. What we should be doing is raising wages in these professions, creating career paths, and not subjecting them to such debilitating funding cuts that we have to scour the third world to import labour who's prepared to work under these conditions.
But you will know, Philip, the mantra The mantra, sorry to interrupt you, the mantra then from Jeremy Hunt will be, we cannot afford higher wages because of this, in fact, the drive that it has on inflation, particularly in the public sector. And round we go in this ever-decreasing circle, it seems.
Yeah. Look, I think the evidence to the contrary is quite compelling. There was a massive report on inflation in the European Union just published. And 45% of inflation was higher import costs, like energy, like oil, like food chains. But 45% of the rise in prices in the European Union was down to profit grabs by increased corporate profits. And I'm afraid that it's quite difficult to imagine that it's very different in the UK. Why would it be? And what we have in this government is an ideology of the free market, but in reality, we've created in many industries monopolies and oligopolies that can price gouge without any intervention from the government whatsoever.
Yeah,
and we have the paradox of a government that can't create free markets, and when they raise prices to raise profits, they then attack people who are rightly concerned about the falling value of their wages.
And just on that, we've seen that on this report from the Commission of Markets Authority, of course, on petrol prices and the profiteering that's been going on from the supermarkets. Very much a case in point. But, Philip, we'll have to leave it there, and clearly we'll see what this group of 25 MPs who are meeting at the moment come up with a little later. For your